I want to speak about when a chosen goes no contact, what it means for you and what it means for those around you. Because when you say no contact, it's more than a boundary, it's a verdict. It's a decision that was made after too many warnings went ignored. It is a final door closing because everything before it was an evacuation drill. You just survived. You are a person of assignment. You are a person of discernment. And you are someone who has outgrown familiar harm. And no contact is protection. It is going to preserve you. It's going to allow you to recover. And it is obedience. The cost when the same hands that claim to love you keep corroding your spirit. And for some of you, they are still contacting you because access was the only thing keeping their drama upright. Because your presence played the role they refused to play for themselves. Because removing you exposes what they never wanted to face. No contact threatens people who depended on your emotional labor, your intuition, your strength, your forgiveness, and your stability. They weren't attached to you, they were attached to the benefits of you. So they're going to panic, they're going to reach, they're going to poke, they're going to bait, and they're going to pretend. They will even casually show up to see if the door you locked can be nudged open. No contact is a spiritual order for you. Once heaven seals a boundary, no apology can unseal it. Not because you're bitter, but because you're done bleeding. You saw the pattern, you felt the drain, and you noticed the spiritual consequences of keeping certain people close. You recognized the price your peace was paying, and you recognized that loving them from a distance was still placing you in range of the same cycles. So now the boundary is not emotional. You are not ignoring them. You're obeying God's redirection. You're not being cold. You're being covered. You're not isolating. You are insulating. You're not cutting ties. You're cutting spiritual pipelines that were siphoning destiny level strength out of you. When you go no contact, it's because you have to retreat. It's because something dangerous is trying to regain access. You didn't imagine this shift. You didn't overreact. You woke up. You got tired of the cycle. You stopped betraying yourself to keep familiar doors open. Their discomfort is not your assignment anymore. And I spoke about that yesterday. But your health is, your calling is, your rise is, your peace is, and your restoration is. No contact exposes who people were the whole time, not who they became, who they were. When you finally step back, you see everything clearly. You see the moments that didn't feel right. You see the conversation that left your spirit feeling violated. You see the patterns you try to rationalize. And you see how many times you minimized your own discomfort just to keep things functioning. You didn't suddenly go no contact. Not at all. You slowly realized you had been in survival mode for too long, and stepping away was the only way to breathe again. People think no contact is some sort of tactic, something you do to teach someone a lesson. But for the chosen, for the spiritually gifted, for those with assignments, no contact is a spiritual revelation. It's heaven saying, you can't stay here anymore. This environment has expired. And when heaven calls time on a relationship, a family tie, a friendship, an entanglement, or a toxic dynamic, you don't get to negotiate. Your spirit stops cooperating with what used to feel normal. Your intuition starts firing before your mind catches up, and your energy starts rejecting what your emotions once tolerated. No contact becomes the only way to protect the destiny you're stepping into. Once you go no contact, some of them will panic but not because they miss you, but because they miss the privileges that came with having you. You were their peace, their stability, and their clarity. And you were the one who brought sense into their drama, their confusion. You were the one who caught spiritual attacks before they landed. And you were the one who soothed storms they created. And when you walk away, they feel the consequences of their choices in their bones, often for the first time in their life. Their discomfort is not your invitation. Their regret is not your responsibility. And their sudden self awareness is not your assignment. Those emotions belong to them. Let them sit with it. Let them wrestle with it. Let them learn from it without pulling you back into the cycle that drained you. They're trying to contact you because you were the stabilizer in their chaotic universe. The chosen are often stabilizers wherever they stay, wherever they lay their head, wherever they work, in their relationships. You weren't just a person to them, you were a system. You were a source, a life jacket, a bandage, a reset button, a spiritual covering they didn't honor because they didn't understand it. People rarely appreciate the person who sustains them. They only appreciate the absence. That's why they reach back again. Not because they changed, not because they have healed, not because they got the revelation. They reach out because your silence revealed how much they depended on you. And it's not love, it's loss. And you are not obligated to respond. Your no contact break unholy agreements. When you go no contact, you're not just avoiding conversations anymore. You're breaking spiritual agreements that were draining your strength. There were connections that were never divine. There were relationships that were tied to the old versions of you. And there were familiar spirits that used people as access points to get to you. And there were long standing permissions they had into your heart, your mind, and your energy. And when you pull back, those permissions collapsed. That's why they reacted. That's why they spiraled. That's why they suddenly miss you. And that's why they suddenly want to talk. Your absence disrupted their spiritual comfort. Your boundary has dismantled the dynamic that benefited them. And now they don't know how to function without you being the stabilizer. And guess what? Not your problem. You're not cold. You're not heartless. You're not ignoring someone who needs you. It's not yours, it's theirs. They projected it onto you because accountability feels foreign to them. No contact forces them to face themselves. And instead of processing their own reflection, they try to make you feel guilty for stepping back. But the guilt isn't real, it's just a reaction. You're abandoning the version of you that tolerated pain as normal. Even the chosen can be contaminated by proximity. Your spirit is sensitive, your assignment is heavy, your intuition is advanced, and your discernment is wired to pick up what others miss. And so some people think chosen ones are strong enough to handle anything. But that's why heaven starts pulling you out of certain environments, because certain people weaken your spiritual stamina without you realizing it. Their jealousy affects your peace. Their entitlement affects your focus. Their resentment affects your creativity. And their bitterness affects your balance. No contact isn't just emotional distance, it's a spiritual detox. And detox feels lonely, but it's the loneliness that cleanses you. You don't owe anyone a goodbye. You don't owe them a closure call. And you don't owe them a final explanation they won't respect anyway. People who mishandled you don't get the privilege of narrative. You chose silence because silence is safer than giving them one. One more chance to lie, to twist, to manipulate, or guilt trip their way back into your life. You choosing silence was the most spiritual decision you've made this year. When people lose access to the version of you they misused, they don't say, I mishandled them. They say, you're acting funny. You're being dramatic. You're too sensitive. Though they're wrong. Because you're finally protected. No contact doesn't make you cold, it makes you covered. And people who benefited from unrestricted access will always label your protection as cold. And that too is not your concern. You're not going back. Not to the familiar patterns, the old wounds, the repeated cycles, the self abandonment, to the people who drain you, to the hands that broke you, to the places that diluted you, to the conversations that never grew, to dynamics that were killing your spirit, one interaction after another. And your no contact really means I finally chose myself because God already chose me. Your future is too large for old attachments. Your calling is too weighty for shallow relationships. And your destiny is too important for recycled betrayal. You're stepping into a season where silence is the sword and distance is your deliverance. The year 2026 is a door, and it's staying closed. No contact isn't a trend. It isn't a tactic. It isn't emotional rebellion. It isn't immature withdrawal. It's spiritual intelligence. When God pulls you out of a connection, He doesn't ask for permission. He doesn't wait for your emotions. He doesn't care if your history screams stay. He removes you because your future requires it. And most people don't realize this until they're standing alone in a quiet room, breathing for the first time in years, wondering why peace feels like unfamiliar territory. No contact isn't random, but it is always, always a preemptive strike. It's heaven rerouting your path before what was sent to destroy you arrives on the scene. It's spiritual evacuation. It's divine timing disguised as sudden distance. You didn't wake up in the cold, you were done. Something in you began to dry up around them. Your spirit stopped agreeing with their presence, and your intuition started warning you before your mind could explain why. And that was heaven shielding you, not punishing you, shielding you. Because if you had stayed any longer, your destiny would have started leaking through the cracks of your loyalty. Loyalty was the rope, and they used it to pull you back into pain. But your loyalty is sacred, it's pure, and it is dangerous. Not to you, but to anyone who tries to misuse it. When you love someone, you love with your entire being. When you commit past logic. When you care beyond what is safe. And people with selfish intentions study that. They know your heart is all in. They know your forgiveness runs deep. They know you give chances long after wisdom stays or says stop. They know you're the one who sees potential instead of their patterns of behavior. So they use what is holy in you to keep what is toxic in them alive. But no contact becomes the only way to stop a cycle they had no intention of ending. You didn't lack strength, you lacked a strategy, because the boundary you refuse to set becomes the doorway that they will walk through. You hoped they would respect what you never enforced. You hoped they would value what you gave freely. You hoped they would choose you the way you chose them. You hoped they would stop before they hit the line. But people with entitlement don't stop at lines. They step over them. They erase them, and they blame you for putting them there. So God removed the whole hallway. And that's why things shifted suddenly. Conversations became draining. Your tolerance shrank. Your spirit couldn't stay still around them. You felt God quietly nudging you in the direction of solitude because your soul was being pulled away from what no longer had permission to sit at your table. And once you go no contact, they feel it. They feel the distance. They feel the vacuum. They feel the absence of the benefits they took for granted. They feel the silence hitting their ego harder than your words ever did. When people relied on your emotional labor, your silence becomes judgment, not because you're condemning them, but because your absence reveals what they never wanted to admit. You were the glue, the peace, the wisdom, the protection, and you were the covering they mishandled. And when you're gone, the dysfunction they hid behind you resurfaces. And this is why they reach out, not to reconnect, but to regain what your presence kept balanced. So don't confuse their panic for repentance. Guilt is the trap that pulls chosen people back into cycles they outgrew. You feel guilty because you've been conditioned to carry the emotional weight for everyone around you. You spent years explaining years fixing what you didn't break, years apologizing just to keep the peace, and years shrinking to make others feel bigger. But guilt was never yours. It was assigned to you. You inherited it from the dynamics that taught you to carry pain that wasn't your responsibility. And every time you tried to step back, someone guilt tripped at you back into service. No contact breaks that cycle. And that's why guilt rises, because guilts hate being interrupted. So let it rise, let it shake, let it scream, and let it pass. You're not abandoning anyone. You are abandoning the old version of you that tolerated harm as normal. Some people had access to more than your time. They had access to your spirit, your intuition, your responses, your strength, your emotional supply, and your discernment. And they fed off you without ever acknowledging the cost. And so when you go no contact, you're not disconnecting from a person. You are disconnecting from a spiritual permission that was draining your destiny. That's why your clarity snaps back into place. You didn't just leave them, you left what was using them. The moment you step back, revelation rushes in. You begin to see what you couldn't see while you were inside the dysfunction. You start remembering red flags you suppressed or overlooked. You start connecting dots you never slowed down long enough to examine. You start noticing how exhausted you were. You start realizing you are operating at half strength because someone else was feeding on the other half. And this is why clarity terrifies people who benefited from your confusion. They know once you see them clearly, once you know the truth of them, you'll never return. You cannot heal in the same environment that hurt you. This is the lesson that breaks the cycle permanently. Healing requires distance, real distance. Not less talking, not reduced time, not boundary conversations. Full, uncompromised, untangled distance. Because if the environment is contaminated, your healing becomes temporary. You heal a little, interact again, and reopen everything you closed. No contact is not about them. It's about giving your spirit the silence it needs in order to restore what was drained. So healing without distance is just managing pain. This is the truth that these individuals will never admit. Some people will never stop draining you, not because they're evil, but because they're spiritually undeveloped. They are not aware of themselves. They aren't accountable. They aren't introspective, and they aren't responsible with emotions. And they aren't spiritually awakened enough to see the damage they cause. You staying close doesn't help them grow, it enables them. People don't transform because you endured them. They transform because they finally feel the weight of losing you. Some revelations require distance. Some lessons require silence. And some transformations require removal. From the outside, it looks like you're being distant. But from the spiritual realm, it looks like deliverance. No contact frees you from attachments that were holding your destiny hostage. No contact frees you from emotional patterns that trapped you. No contact frees you from invisible soul ties that blocked your creativity and clarity. And people don't transform because you endured them. They transform because they finally feel the weight of losing you. Some revelations require distance, some lessons require silence, and some transformations require removal. And from the spiritual realm, it looks like deliverance, holding your destiny hostage. Those invisible soul ties blocked your creativity and your clarity. Your no contact is freeing you from the spiritual drains that weakened your intuition. And no contact frees you from cycles that didn't honor your calling. Distance is heaven cleaning the atmosphere. And some of the people God pulled you away from were people you would have kept forever simply because you were used to them, not because they were good or healthy, because they were spiritually in tune not with you, so you thought. But because familiarity is addictive, it feels like comfort, it feels safe, it feels like loyalty, and it feels like home. But familiarity can also be a prison. And when God wants to grow you, He breaks you out of anything that keeps you small. No contact is the jailbreak. You're not going back. Not emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, energetically, or relationally. You finally reached a point where your spirit refuses to shrink, silence, or suffocate itself again because you're in a new season with new authority, new insight, new discernment, and new protection. The door behind you is closed and not by your hand, by God's. So they can call, reach, apologize, panic, miss you, rewrite history, romanticize memories, or attempt to reopen chapters. It changes nothing. Your absence is permanent. Your exit is ordained. Your silence is sealed. You didn't lose them. You graduated from them. And the peace you feel now, that's your confirmation. You've paid the price for peace with sleepless nights, silent battles, and private awakenings. You walked away, but your spirit needed the why behind the walk. Your destiny speaks in distance before it speaks in direction. You don't get a map. You don't get instructions. You don't get a clear announcement, and you get distance. Suddenly, conversations feel off. Interactions drain you quicker. Your patience shortens. Your intuition heightens. And your silence becomes natural. Your energy becomes conservative because your tolerance collapses. That's the language of destiny speaking to you. Your calling will remove you from your environment before your mind knows why. When no contact rises in your spirit, it's your destiny whispering. Your future doesn't fit here anymore. And see, your spirit will show you what your eyes ignored. When you distance yourself, your spirit finally has room to speak. And this is where the revelations start pouring out. The moments that didn't settle right. You start noticing reactions you downplayed. You start connecting patterns you brushed off. You start seeing the manipulation that hid under love. You start recognizing dishonor disguised as concern, and you start recognizing how many times they handled you casually while benefiting heavily. Distance allows your soul to replay the tape without the distortion of emotional attachment. So you didn't rewrite history. You finally see it. And this is why no contact is scary for them, because your clarity is their accountability. And you were never safe around them. You were just strong. And this one hurts. Some people mistake your strength for safety. They think because you survived them, you were fine. They think because you handled their drama, you were equipped for it. And they think because you didn't complain, you were unaffected. But the truth is, you weren't safe. You were just strong. And the moment you stopped carrying what they assumed you could handle, you realized the situation was draining you in ways you never measured. Strength can mask damage, survival can camouflage suffering, and functioning can hide wounds. No contact helps you see what you were enduring. See, your exit was the first time that they will have to face themselves. People who avoid accountability depend on your presence to avoid self reflection. And as long as you're there, they'll blame you, They can distract themselves with you. They can argue with you. They can guilt trip you. They can make you the issue, and they can protect and project onto you. But when you leave, silence becomes their mirror. They only have their self to blame. And your absence forces them to look at what your presence used to cover. And that's why they reach back out, not for you, but to silence the noise inside themselves that your presence used to buffer. Your exit triggered their awakening, not their transformation. There's a difference. Awareness does not equal change, so don't mistake the two. Chosen people rarely see the cost of a relationship while they're inside it. You see the cost afterward, and the fatigue that hits your spirit, and the peace that feels strange, and the stillness that feels strange, and the spiritual oxygen that returns to your lungs, and the way you suddenly feel yourself again. And when you look back and realize you weren't tired, you were drained, and you weren't confused, you were manipulated. You weren't just emotional, you were spiritually overloaded. You weren't too sensitive. You were responding correctly to dishonor. No contact reveals that you were carrying a load that belonged to someone else. When God removes someone, he also reveals their function. Some people were not relationships, they were assignments. They were the lessons, the awakening, the warnings, the indicators, and the tests. And once you pass the test, the connection dissolves. You cry over the loss, not realizing the loss was actually the graduation. If they were meant to go into the next version of your life, the door wouldn't have closed. They were there for a chapter, not your full story. No contact is the bookmark. Your spirit stops negotiating with what hurts it. Before no contact even happens, your mind does the negotiating. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe if I gave them time. Maybe I'm overreacting. And maybe tomorrow will be better. But once your spirit speaks, the negotiation ends. Your spirit doesn't argue. Your spirit doesn't rationalize. And your spirit doesn't explain because your spirit doesn't tolerate. Your spirit simply says enough. And once your spirit says enough, everything else follows. When you pull back, you're not the only one who feels the shift. The spirit realm reacts first because assignments begins to break, ties dissolve, attachments will protest, your energy will shift, your cycles will collapse. The projections they try to put on you will stop working, and the influences will lose their foothold. And that's why no contact feels intense, because you're severing more than communication, you're severing spiritual access. And people often react strangely because the spirit that benefited them from proximity is now starving. That is why your peace grows while theirs collapses. And solitude is where your sensitivity resets. Chosen people experience life with heightened spiritual receptors, so crowded environments can distort intuition, especially for those with social anxiety. Toxic environments can jam signals. Unhealthy relationships can muffle discernment. So when you go no contact, your sensitivity resets. Stillness becomes information. Your silence becomes revelation. Your distance becomes healing. And solitude becomes restoration because you begin to hear God more clearly. You begin to notice subtle cues again. You begin to feel your intuition waking up. And you begin to recognize yourself outside of their influence. Solitude isn't loneliness, it's recalibration of your spiritual senses. And you're not grieving the individuals, although you're grieving. But what you're grieving is the version of you that tolerated too much, the hope you invested, the patience you gave, the expectations you built, the loyalty you offered, the years you'll never get back, the conversations you should have had, and the boundaries that you never enforced. You're grieving the you that didn't know better yet. And grief is proof of growth because once you know better, you can't go back. And forgiveness does not require reunion. They told you forgiveness means reconciliation. Forgiveness means giving them access again. Forgiveness means returning to normal, their normal. Forgiveness means softening the boundary. No, forgiveness is internal. Reunion is optional. You can forgive someone and still never let them near you again. You can forgive someone and still keep every door locked. You can forgive someone and still choose silence for the rest of your life. Forgiveness releases the weight. Distance protects the healing. Once the dust settles, you begin to see. If it was real, it would have survived distance. If it was healthy, it would not have required you grieving. It would not have required suffering. If it was mutual, you wouldn't have carried the whole thing. If it was honest, it wouldn't have collapsed when you step back. If it was divine, it wouldn't have drained you. And if it was safe, heaven wouldn't have removed you. No contact reveals truth. Contact blinded you to it. Your future needs the space that they were occupying. You're not just losing someone, you're making room. Room for new connections, divine partnerships, for peace, for growth, for opportunities they would have contaminated, for blessings they would have sabotaged, room for the mentors they would have resented, and room for the love they couldn't match. Your future needed space, and their presence occupied it. No contact isn't emptying, it's preparing. They were not your forever, they were your awakening. Some people enter your life to awaken a part of you that was sleeping. Your discernment, your strength, your boundaries, your intuitions, your standards, and your self worth. Once that awakening happens, their assignment is complete. It hurts, it shakes you, it stretches you, it transforms you. But most importantly, it frees you. And once you are free, you cannot and will not return to what once held you captive in confusion, exhaustion, and compromised peace. No contact is not the end, it is the beginning of your real life. Time doesn't heal every wound, but truth does. Distance does, separation does, and silence does. There are revelations you can't receive in the presence of those who caused the injury. There are understandings you can't hold while still keeping familiarity alive. And there are layers of yourself you can't access until you walk away. Walk away from those who kept you emotionally trapped. You weren't, before your feet moved, your spirit detached. Before your words faded, your energy withdrew. And before the final silence, your inner world started drifting away from from those dynamics that were quietly killing your peace. Your soul leaves quietly before the body moves. People think separation is sudden. No, it's not. They only notice the moment you stop responding, or the moment you don't show up, or the moment the familiar routine shatters. But separation begins long before action. You stop trusting them before you stop talking to them. You stop feeling safe before you stopped answering. You stopped believing in there being an us long before you stopped showing up. And you stop hoping long before you stop trying. The exit happens inward first. Your energy will retreat. Your intuition will stop engaging because you will emotionally unplug, spiritually unplug, and mentally unplug. The body is always the last to leave. You were being prepared to survive the release. See, what you thought was emotional numbness was actually spiritual anesthesia. Heaven was preparing you to disconnect from something you were too loyal to release on your own. The disconnect didn't feel like a breakup. It felt like a lifting, as if something was pulling you out of a place you didn't know you were drowning in. And people say, you changed. No, you woke up. Your spirit stopped cooperating with what was hurting you. Your exit wasn't your idea, it was divine intervention. The separation was the answer to a prayer you forgot you prayed. There were nights you must have whispered, I can't do this anymore. I need peace. God, get me out. God, show me who's real. God, show me their intentions, reveal their intentions, and protect my spirit. And heaven heard you and heaven answered. But divine answers rarely feel like divine comfort. Sometimes the answer is a door slamming. that you were too patient to close. Sometimes the answer is a relationship collapsing under its own dishonor. And sometimes the answer is truth coming out in ways you never expected. Because the answer is discomfort forcing you to exit spaces you would have died trying to maintain. Yes, God answered. But He answered by removing the very thing you were trying to hold together. You didn't know why or how heavy it was until you let go. Your chest feels different, your mind sounds different, your energy flows differently, your sleep deepens, your appetite returns, your intuition sharpens. You thought the stress was life. You didn't know it was them. You thought the exhaustion had to do with age. You didn't know it was from the drain of emotional overextension. You thought your silence was detachment. You didn't know it was spiritual protection pulling you away from contamination. You didn't know how heavy the bond was until heaven removed it and your soul could finally breathe. Most people analyze relationships emotionally. They never examine them spiritually. But chosen individuals don't experience connections at surface level. Every relationship you've ever had unseen implications, be it spiritual, psychological, or generational. No contact doesn't just remove a person, it shuts down a spiritual pipeline. A connection didn't just expose you to the personality, it exposed you to insecurity, their wounds, their projections, their trauma, their dysfunction, their unhealed history, their generational battles, and their spiritual weaknesses. People don't bring themselves into your life, they bring themselves into your entire ecosystem. And if you don't have discernment, you make their ecosystem for compatibility. You mistake that. You believe they are compatible, but no contact closes a gate you didn't realize you were holding open. And this is why they suddenly reached out after you left. Not because they understood or cared or changed, but because their spirit felt the withdrawal of the stability you provided. Your presence was a shield they abused. Your intuition was a guidance system they relied on. And your emotional intelligence was a blanket they wrapped themselves in. And your absence interrupted their comfort. See, their spirit panicked long before their mind formed a sentence. This is why people call feeling someone pulling away. You weren't pulling away, you were being pulled out. When someone tries to reconnect, don't romanticize that. They're not missing you, they're missing what they extracted from you. Whether it's your availability, your spiritual insight, your loyalty, your forgiveness, your patience, your presence, maybe even your intuition. And let's not say it may not have been, it may be support in many different ways because you were the stabilizing influence. See, no contact reveals what the relationship actually was. Some people didn't love you, they used you to avoid meeting themselves. They were not attached to your heart, they were attached to the benefits your heart provided. So basically, it was access, not affection. And every time you went back, you diminished your spiritual authority. Every time you returned, you ignored your intuition, you silenced your inner voice, you overrode divine warnings, and you lowered your standards, and you betrayed your own spirit. Each return tightened the bond and weakened your inner authority. But when you finally stayed gone, your spiritual authority reactivated. And so you sharpened, you deepened, and you strengthened. Leaving wasn't rebellion, it was recovery. And no contact doesn't just remove someone, it upgrades you. It elevates your soul, it matures your discernment, it strengthens your voice, it restores your identity, it resets your self worth. You become unrecognizable to the version of you that loved them. Not because you changed suddenly, but because you return to yourself. The version of you that tolerated disrespect doesn't exist anymore. The version of you that settled for crumbs no longer lives here. The version of you that silenced your needs has been buried. No contact allowed the real you to come out of hiding. And when the real you emerges, when you emerge, past connections can't survive. And peace becomes your new normal. At first, the silence feels loud, then it feels strange, then it feels liberating, then it feels necessary, and then it feels sacred, and eventually peace becomes your baseline. You don't negotiate it, you don't compromise it or apologize for it. You build your life around it. The people who thrive in your next season are people who don't threaten your peace. You stop accepting all the halves. What do I mean? Half love, half communication, half honesty, half presence, half effort, and half reciprocity. You stop explaining your worth. You stop tolerating emotional inconsistency. You stop entertaining low vibration dynamics. You stop merging with people who sabotage themselves. And you stop accepting positions that shrink your spirit. You don't raise your standards consciously, they rise automatically when you reconnect with your identity. Your discernment becomes razor sharp. Your spirit knows what dishonor feels like, so you can detect it instantly in a tone, in silence, in motives, and inconsistencies, in their patterns, in their behavior, in the way someone's energy entered the room. You don't need confrontation, don't need explanation. Your discernment knows. And so you say to yourself, let me step back. I'm not entertaining this. This is familiar. This is harmful. This is dangerous. The very situations that once confused you can no longer deceive you. You realize separation was your birthright, not your battle. See, chosen individuals are often taught to endure, tolerate, and hold on. But the truth, some exits are ordained before you were even born. Some people were never meant to stay. Some connections were never, well, they were temporary classrooms. Some relationships were spiritual detours, and some ties were never part of your destiny. Separation wasn't your failure, it was your alignment with divine design for your life. Your rise required the removal. You walked into yourself. No contact isn't about losing someone, it's about finding you. Your peace, your power, your identity, your craft, your voice, your intuition, your purpose, your connection to God, your spiritual stamina, your self respect. You didn't leave them. You returned to yourself. And the version of you who returned is someone they can no longer reach. Before you ever pulled away physically, something pulled away from you. The break didn't start in the natural world, it started in the unseen realm. People assume separation begins with conflict. No, it begins with a spiritual mismatch. Your internal frequency rose and theirs stayed still. Your consciousness expanded and theirs remained limited. Your spirit matured and theirs resisted growth. You cannot stay connected to someone who refuses to evolve with you. Not emotionally, not psychologically, and not spiritually. Your elevation created a pressure their complacency couldn't handle. That pressure is what pushed the separation. So your spirit outgrew the environment before you realized it. So it didn't matter how much you loved them. It didn't matter how long you knew them. It didn't matter how invested you were in them. Your spirit outgrew the space. When the soil of a relationship stops feeding your roots leave quietly, gradually, spiritually. By the time the relationship dissolved in the natural world, you were already gone internally. God removed you from what would have diluted your destiny, and He didn't ask. He didn't ask at all. He intervened. He saw the damage you were normalizing. He saw the pressure you were hiding. He saw the spiritual contamination you didn't realize you were breathing in. And he saw the emotional drain that was pulling your purpose off course. Your calling was too high, your sensitivity was too open, your gifting was too active, and your destiny was too specific to stay connected to someone who had no respect for what heaven placed inside you. So, yes, your exit was divine protection. God never abandoned you. It doesn't matter if it's family, if it's a friend, a partner, or someone you never saw coming. If God sees danger in them, He cuts the ties before your loyalty imprisons you. You didn't lose a person, you lost a threat disguised as connection. And the more your spirit awakens, the easier it is to see that the removal wasn't cruel, it was merciful. Because chosen individuals rarely recognize the damage until after they finally leave. Your nervous system was carrying more than you realized. Sleepless nights, chest pain, mental fog, exhaustion, and emotional heaviness you couldn't explain. None of it was random. Your body was living in survival mode, holding the emotional labor of two people. You weren't dramatic. You weren't overthinking. You weren't too sensitive. You were overloaded, overextended, and overexposed. No contact wasn't just emotional, it was physiological relief. It was biological relief. Your spiritual sensitivity was being overridden. You started ignoring your intuition. You dismissed red flags. You quieted the warnings and you suppressed your discernment just to keep peace. Every time you return, you trained yourself to mute the very system God gave you to protect your life. Returning to them was returning to spiritual danger, and every return weakened your inner authority. You weren't in control. Your peace was the invisible collateral. You weren't just losing energy, you were losing alignment. The relationship demanded your silence, your sacrifice, and your emotional absorption of all their mess. It demanded your self abandonment, your self doubt, and your inner shrinking because it demanded that you spiritually compromise. And peace wasn't absent, it was suffocated. You only realized this once you left. So, no contact is not passive, it is an activation. When a chosen individual disconnects, your spirit begins recognizing itself. While connected, your intuition was muffled, but after no contact, it becomes crystal clear. You see who they were, what they were hiding, how they were draining you, where the disrespect began, how long the dishonor was present, why your intuition never felt safe, and how many times you abandoned yourself to keep harmony. Your vision sharpens because spiritual noise is finally cleared and your nervous system resets, right? Because you stop bracing yourself for emotional impact, always believing and feeling like something was going to happen because you were in a state of continual chronic stressors. So now you stop anticipating manipulation. You stop preparing for disappointment. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. And you stop replaying words that bruised your soul. Your body finally experiences peace without permission, and your calling becomes clearer. Your creativity wakes up, your intelligence deepens, your voice strengthens, your emotional clarity returns, your ideas start flowing again. You didn't lack creativity, you were spiritually suffocating. So, distance restores your divine channel. You start being able to create in ways you had not before because you couldn't focus on being creative. There was so much going on around you that had nothing to do with you and that you were involved in or you involved yourself in that you weren't able to see from that divine channel, right? They think the person comes back because they miss you. They don't. Don't think that. Because chosen individuals operate on spiritual frequency, so do the people connected to you. So when you disconnect, something in them notices. Because this is where people misunderstand everything. This is why they panic when you disconnect. And when you do disconnect, something in them notices. They panic because your energy was stability. You weren't just a partner or a family member or a friend. You were their regulator. You made problems go away. You helped the house run smoothly. You were the caretaker. Your presence kept the chaos stable. Your emotional maturity softened their triggers. Your spiritual awareness shielded their battles. And your intuition stopped their destruction. They weren't attached to you, they were attached to the stability you provided. And now that stability is gone. And they panic because their spirit lost a covering. You covered them spiritually, not knowingly, but naturally. Chosen individuals radiate protection without speaking. They find answers, they receive healing, their mental state stabilizes, their finances improve because your presence keeps things from collapsing. But once you leave, the collapse they avoided for years finally will show up. Your absence awakened their consequences, and they panic because their manipulation no longer works. Manipulators rely on access, and once you're gone, their methods fail. They can't guilt trip you, they can't provoke you, they can't bait you, they can't confuse you, they can't drain you, and they can't redirect your intuition. They have no foothold any longer. Your silence breaks every tactic they once used successfully in the past. And the first phase after no contact feels raw. But then something shifts. Your identity begins to reconstruct itself. You become aware of the emotional labor you performed unseen because you begin to realize you mediated their moods, you soothed their insecurities, you managed their drama, you carried their projections, you justified their disrespect. You absorbed their emotional storms. You acted as their therapist, protector, anchor, regulator, and emotional system. You weren't in a relationship. You were doing spiritual CPR on someone who refused to breathe on their own. And now you're relearning your emotional baseline without their influence because you will discover what peace feels like, what silence feels like, what clarity feels like, what calm feels like, even what normal feels like. You will learn what your true personality feels like because your real energy will emerge. You didn't know how lost you were until you felt yourself again. And you stop seeking closure because you become closure. And you realize they can't explain what they don't understand. They can't fix what they refuse to admit. They can't, and you realize they can't take responsibility for what they deny. Because closure isn't a conversation, closure is awareness. And now that you understand what the connection really was, closure will rise organically, naturally. You'll begin to emerge with authority. And then you'll begin to speak differently, walk differently, think differently, decide differently, discern differently, love differently. And you'll protect yourself differently. And there's a quiet authority on you now, a spiritual weight, a non negotiable presence. You don't beg for respect, you embody it. Your standards are no longer verbal, they are energetic. You don't have to explain boundaries anymore. When you walk into a room, people will feel it. When you're in a relationship, they will know it. They will sense what they can't get away with. They're going to sense what they can't say to you. They're going to sense what they can't disrupt. And they are going to sense what you won't tolerate. Your energy will do the screening. And you will become untouchable to the spirits that once accessed you through people. The connection was the doorway. But no contact is going to seal that doorway. And now your peace is untouchable, your intuition is untouchable, your spirit is untouchable, your purpose is untouchable, and your future is untouchable. You elevated out of their reach. You become the version of you heaven was waiting for. You no longer are diluted. You're no longer drained or distracted. You are no longer being misused. And you are no longer spiritually entangled, right? You feel aligned. You're finally aligned. And that alignment will shift everything. And your relationships will change. Your opportunities will expand. Your creativity will amplify. Your discernment will sharpen. Your authority will strengthen. And your peace will multiply. No contact didn't destroy you, it revealed you to you. So you didn't lose anything. You gained yourself. And that is the whole point of no contact. See, you were being trained to detach emotionally because heaven knew a physical detachment was coming. Your soul practiced the exit while your mind tried to rationalize the bond. You didn't grow distant because you stopped caring. You grew distant because caring was costing you pieces of yourself. You didn't leave them, you left a version of yourself. You sacrificed your well being to maintain a bond to someone who didn't care enough. So the you that will walk away or has walked away is not the same you that had stayed in the past. That's the old you. Because the old you overgave, overexplained, overlooked, overaccommodated, overtrusted, overbelonged, and overcarried. And the new you observes, discerns, protects. You hold standards. You choose peace. You value stillness. And you move with intention. Your exit wasn't a moment, it was an evolution. When you're in someone's life, anyone's life, or anywhere, they receive benefits that is beyond what they can articulate. And when you disconnect, you don't just take your presence, you take the covering your presence generated. It's almost like as you walk, the covering that's over them, imagine if it was fabric and it just follows you as you're going. It's a long train and you're walking away, and so is the covering just right off of their head. And then their life, it becomes louder because it'll be messier. It'll become more complicated because it's more exposed. You weren't their blessing to them, your presence was. And so your absence will expose their dependence on it. Their spirit will begin to fill the void of what you once carried for them. Your exit disrupted more than emotional dynamic. It disrupted the spiritual machinery they ran on. And this is why chosen individuals feel lighter after parting, because you unknowingly carried what heaven never asked you to carry. And once distance settles in, your health changes, steadies, stabilizes, relaxes. Your body knew the exit was necessary before your heart accepted it. This is why chosen people feel physically different after walking away, because the spiritual tension is gone and the body is finally done bracing for what the soul outgrew. So you begin to, after enough distance, your revelations will begin to hit, remembering things differently. You can see the patterns you missed, the dishonor you tolerated, the manipulation you excused. You're going to replay conversations with new eyes. And the truth will arrive slowly at first, then all at once. And the more truth you receive, the easier it becomes to accept your exit as divine necessity. You are carrying their storms, making excuses for their deficiencies, because you were sacrificing yourself in order to maintain a connection at a cost. You didn't leave too soon, you left too late. If you would have stayed, they would have drained opportunities. You would have, they would have sabotaged relationships. They would have blocked your elevation. They would have intervened with your gifts. They would have kept you small. They would have consumed your emotional reserves. They would have prevented your expansion. They would have damaged the future heaven has written for you. And your exit wasn't selfish. It was strategic protection from long-term devastation. And that distance, it makes your spirit lethal again. Your spiritual senses begin to amplify. Your confidence returns. Your energy strengthens. And your inner world expands. The version of you that emerges after separation is not the version they mistreated. This is the untouchable you, the awakened you, the spiritually sharpened you, the self honoring you, the destiny defending you. This is the you they were never meant to reach. You didn't lose anything. You didn't fail anyone. You did not betray yourself, and you didn't walk away from love. You did not abandon connection. You outgrew what was built for the magnitude of your calling. It was not built. If I said was, I'm wrong. You outgrew what was not built for the magnitude of your calling, because your exit wasn't closure, your exit was coronation. The moment you stepped away, your spirit stepped into a higher realm of existence. You chose peace, purpose, future, voice, safety, God led path, divine identity, spiritual protection, and your whole self. You walked away from what couldn't grow so you could walk into what couldn't be hindered. The door didn't just close behind you, it was sealed. And the you that stands here now is the most powerful version you've ever been. You didn't walk out, you walked up, you walked in, and you walked free. Your season ended there. Most people ignore the whisper, the nudges, right? But you didn't. And even if you tried to stay, your spirit started retreating on its own. This was the beginning of your exodus. And at first, you may have felt even confused, not because you didn't know what to do, but because your heart still remembered what your spirit outgrew. But then clarity hit. You're finally seeing who they were, without the filter of any hope. Your soul wasn't confused, it was waking up, because that bond was costing you your life force. You weren't overreacting, you were overstaying. And so at times your ancestors have to step forward, because you came from too much to settle for this little bit. Your generational intelligence rose in your blood. Inherited discernment sharpened. Your lineage refused to let you repeat patterns you were born to break. You were being pulled out by more than intuition. You were being pulled out by history. The universe removes what love would have protected. Your heart wasn't going to leave. Your love wasn't going to detach. Your loyalty wasn't going to release them. So the universe stepped in. And so it orchestrated revelations. It exposed motives. It revealed inconsistencies, and it aligned events that made staying impossible. This wasn't betrayal. This was rescue. Everything you believed about them cracked. Everything you hoped about the connection dissolved. And everything you built emotionally lost its foundation. Illusions defend dysfunction. and truth destroys it. And so your soul will withdraw quietly. You stopped explaining as much. You stopped defending yourself. You stopped trying to fix what only God could correct. You stopped shrinking to keep the peace. You stopped protecting them from the consequences of their own actions because your soul was detaching, because your purpose began tugging at you. Your future refused to sit in confusion. Your gifts refused to grow in contaminated environments, and your anointing refused to expose and expand the chaos any longer because your destiny refused to shrink to match their comfort zone. Your calling demanded separation. Where you were going, they could not follow, and their spirit feels that disconnection. And that's why they may have even reacted strangely, and why at times they may even try to poke at your peace. Their spirit felt that withdrawal of your covering. Not love, not attachment, not connection, but a covering. Your absence has now interrupted their spiritual supply. Your ego wanted closure, your heart wanted understanding, your mind wanted explanations, and your emotions wanted reconciliation. But your soul said no. And the soul always wins against the ego. Eventually, distance became your medicine. And in that quiet, you began to receive clarity. And when you were able to sit still, right, and stabilize, you became the revelation. So you didn't just stop talking, you began to hear. You began to hear your spiritual intuition, your ancestors, your calling, your purpose, and your future self. Silence didn't isolate you, silence is restoring you. And this was the first time your body realized, I'm safe now. I'm safe. And you'll begin to rediscover your likes and dislikes, your needs, your boundaries, find your voice, and learn your spiritual center. You didn't just lose someone, you reclaimed yourself. And with all that space that you created, you're going to see the manipulation, the entitlement, the selfishness, the resentment, the danger, the behavioral patterns that were cycles looping, and their emotional immaturity, because distance transforms confusion. The guilt was never yours, it was placed on you. And once you healed, you realized you were abandoning dysfunction. And that guilt then dissolves because you now understand what you survived. And maybe this is where the tears come in because you finally admit you were hurting, you were tired, you were ignored, you were carrying the connection, you were over functioning for someone under delivering, you were loyal to someone who was inconsistent with you, you were shrinking to maintain peace. They kept disrupting. Seeing this truth breaks something open in you. And this may feel like a grieving time for you because it's really over. You can't go back. You deserve your peace. You outgrew that because now you realize it wasn't love. It was attachment. It was selfishness. It was entitlement. So accept your liberation, your freedom, because you're going to begin to expect more, tolerate less, see quicker, decide faster, choose yourself without guilt because you no longer negotiate with disrespect. Your standards are no longer verbal, they are energetic, and people will feel your boundaries. You're going to radiate with it when you show up, and your gifts are going to be able to grow and expand because the interference is gone. My intuition for myself became razor sharp. My dream state returned. And for you, for some of you, your foresight will even activate, your creativity awaken, spiritual senses intensify. And this is what you were like before you were drained, now amplified, because your destiny starts moving again. Your delays will break, your opportunities will appear, your doors is going to open, your mentors will arrive, your connections are going to form because your path is going to become clearer. Your future was awaiting on your exit, and you will become unreachable to who you used to be around. You can never return, not emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, or energetically. They can't reach you, even if they have access, because you ascended out of the version of you they knew. And this universe is going to begin to send what matches your new self, new people, new opportunities, new conversations, new blessings, new insight, new purpose, and new alignment. Your environment will shift because your vibration shifts. You will become the version of you that heaven always intended. You will speak clearer, you'll think deeply, you'll protect fiercely. You'll move intentionally. You'll love wisely now because you're going to see everything and you're going to settle for nothing and you're going to honor yourself fully. You are no longer going to be dimmed. You are no longer going to be drained. You are no longer compromised. You are you fully. You didn't lose that person. You lost that distraction, that interference, that confusion, that emotional drain, and that spiritual noise. And yes, you gained peace, direction, and strength. Your life doesn't end. Your life is starting. This was your resurrection. And I want to thank you for visiting my channel. I also want to say happy Thanksgiving. I hope that you and yours are enjoying. And if you had to work, I hope this video finds you and gives you peace. And I will see you on the next one. So remember, stay covered, stay conscious, and stay undefeated. Again, I will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.